I think it's pretty clear that mini trucks are super hot right now.
They're back in a big way because we've got tons of new contenders, some from legacy manufacturers and some from companies that are completely new, and that's what we're talking about today.
Exactly. So the biggest news of last week was the new Slate or blank Slate pickup truck, which is a new startup. We also had, a couple months ago, the Telo MT1 pickup truck.
Yeah, both really interesting designs.
Yeah, but in this video, we want to see how they compare to the established player in the world, which is the Ford Maverick, which sells on average about 12,000 little pickup trucks a month. And that's a tall order to fight against.
That's true, but realistically, that is the truck that both of these new startups need to be aiming for if they want to have a decent sized market share. And the Maverick's got a lot going for it, but so do some of these new designs. So let's run down the list of all the major features on these and see which one looks like it's got the most potential.
Let's start with size, because Maverick actually, it's called a compact pickup truck, but actually it has a pretty longish wheelbase. It's about 121 inches. And it's overall about 200 inches long, which actually doesn't make it much smaller than the Ford Ranger, but it offers a hybrid and gasoline turbocharged powertrains. But what about Slate?
So the Slate has about a 109-inch wheelbase, so it's a very compact truck. Total length around 175 inches. So what? It's about a foot shorter in its wheelbase and over 25 inches shorter overall.
Yeah, so it's a lot shorter than the Maverick, actually. And of course, Slate Auto, the Slate blank Slate pickup truck.
Right.
It has a weird name.
It is. It's a little funky.
It's way smaller, but it has a slightly bigger bed than the Maverick.
Yeah, that's true. So the Maverick's got a 4.5-foot bed. The Slate has a 5-foot bed, so both pretty small beds. But the Slate does have a decent bit of size. Of course, the biggest difference that you're going to find between these two is the fact that the Maverick comes as a full 4-door and reasonably comfortably sized 4-door pickup truck with a bed. Whereas in the Slate, you can convert it into an SUV to seat 5 people, or you can have it as a 2-door truck. They say it's pretty easy to convert back and forth in between, but if you have it in truck form, it is going to be a 2-seater, a single cab.
Exactly. And the Slate's bed has a little bit more volume, about 37 cubic feet versus 33.3 in the Maverick. But we got to talk about Telo MT1. So the MT1 is the only pickup they showed so far. And both Telo and Slate, they really want to come to market in 2026, which is about a year and a half away from now. But Telo is a whole different animal because it's more compact than the Slate.
Yeah.
And I think it uses its space a lot more efficiently, actually.
Yeah, it almost follows a little bit of the original Mini Cooper's idea of design. So the wheels are pushed out into the corners. Interestingly enough, the wheelbase on the Telo is 111 inches, so it's just slightly longer wheelbase than the Slate, but overall it's 152 inches long, so it's actually much shorter.
It's almost 2 feet shorter than the Slate.
Yeah.
That's hard to believe.
Yeah, and the Slate is about 2 feet shorter than the Maverick.
Exactly, but somehow Telo was managed to put 4 doors, room for 5. Nathan actually went out there and he drove the prototype of the Telo, and he kind of crawled all the way around the new Telo truck. And also it has a midgate. So Telo pickup has a midgate, kind of like the old Avalanches and the new Silverado EVs, where you could fold it down and you could convert that 5-foot bed that the Telo has into an 8-foot bed.
Yeah, which is pretty cool, that adaptability that allows you to configure the truck however best suits your needs for that current day, which is also kind of the idea of the Slate. But the Maverick is similar too. There, since the Maverick came out, have been a couple of accessories that you could scan and 3D print for the Maverick to make it a little bit more adaptable in how you carry things around, in the bed especially. But the Slate and the Telo bring that adaptability really to another level.
Exactly. And of course, Slate said they have about 100 or more than 100 accessories already in mind to offer. Now, we got to talk about payload and towing, because that's what little pickups or pickup trucks in general have to do really, really well. And actually, there's a lot of good news here on payload.
Yeah, payload figures are pretty good. So on the Maverick, and it depends on what model you get, but you'll have around about 1,500 pounds of payload, and that's actually very similar to what you get in the Slate truck.
Exactly. They quoted 1,433 pounds on the Slate two-door pickup truck, and the Telo is between 1,700 and 2,000 pounds of payload, depending on if it's a one-motor electric truck or a dual-motor all-wheel drive electric truck. Of course, when you add more motors or more stuff to a vehicle, the payload comes down.
Yeah, so that's one of the potential advantages with the Telo. Now, on the subject of towing, the Maverick, if you spec it with a max tow package, you'll have 4,000 pounds of towing, and we've even pulled up the Ike with the hybrid version, max tow at 4,000 pounds, and it did really well.
Exactly, and we were pleased, even going down the mountain, which you and I weren't sure initially.
Yeah.
But it did really well.
Yeah, it did. So flying colors on the Ike Gauntlet, towing its maximum rating. The Slate, on the other hand, this is one of the low points for it.
1,000 rating for towing, and they might as well would have said it doesn't tow.
Yeah, that's pretty low.
It will tow something, just not a lot.
Yeah.
Telo said 6,600 pounds, almost 7,000 pounds of towing, except they also said, I mean, Telo is a pretty compact vehicle, so you don't want to tow cross country. But I guess if you want to pull something from one job site or one campsite to another, shorter distances, you would be able to pull actually quite a lot of weight.
Yeah. Now, another one of the big differences between these trucks is going to be the powertrains. And it's one of the nice things with the Maverick that there's quite a bit of flexibility in the powertrains. So you can get a hybrid model like what we have as a company vehicle. It's very efficient. We've seen around 40 mpg with combined city and highway driving. So really good on that front. Or you can get something like the Maverick Lobo that does sacrifice a little bit of the utility side of things, especially in towing, but that bumps you up to, 238 horsepower?
Exactly, and a little bit more sporty character in the Lobo Maverick as well. You test drove one, and you had some fun on the autocross
It's
course.
fun to drive. It's definitely a more exciting truck to drive, the Lobo, than our 191 horsepower hybrid version of the Maverick, but they're both good trucks.
And exactly, and when we published the first Slate video that Nathan did, thank you, Nathan, by the way, many of you commented and said, why isn't the Slate two-door truck, why doesn't it have a gasoline power plant or a hybrid power plant? You know, what's going on? Why does it have to be electric? And I think really the core of that answer has to do with the size of the vehicle and also the efficiency that the government requires. Because the smaller the vehicle over the last, 5 decades of the EPA being in existence, the smaller the vehicle, the higher the efficiency has to be of that vehicle. So if you make something really tiny like the Slate or the Telo, the equation doesn't quite work. They would have to get 60 mpg or more sometimes in order to make it work.
And it's also complicated and expensive developing a combustion powertrain versus potentially finding some off-the-shelf parts.
For electric components.
Yeah,
exactly.
It can simplify things a little bit.
Yeah, so it's kind of gets complicated when you get small.
Yeah.
If you get big, that's why we have diesel pickup trucks, and that's why, that makes sense for the other size of the spectrum. But the power numbers for the Slate is about 201 horsepower, which is plenty.
Yeah, it's enough. They say the top speed is around 90 mile an hour, so it's definitely not going to be a fast truck. It is rear drive, which is also worth keeping in mind because if you live like we do in a snowy climate, something like the all-wheel drive that you can get on a Maverick might be hugely beneficial.
Exactly. And the Telo MT1, if you get a single motor, that's around 300 horsepower. If you get a dual motor system on the Telo, that's 500 horsepower. I can't even imagine.
Sounds terrifying.
Driving that, but hopefully we'll drive them soon.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
The Maverick, of course, is between 191 and 238, like you said. But I think power is not really important in this segment.
It's not the biggest factor, I think, for most people buying a truck in this.
I think it's garageability. It's, how you could park it in the city.
Efficiency,
all those, So you mentioned SUV capability. So both Slate and Telo actually convert into an SUV. Telo also mentioned that. And Telo said if you convert their MT1 into an SUV with a topper in the back, it could sit up to 8 people.
Which sounds like a cramped 8-seater to me because it's a very small vehicle, but... I guess it's theoretically possible.
The only vehicle that I can think of right now that's truck-based is the new Suburban, where you can configure it, for 9 people, because the new Suburban you could get a bench in the front, a bench in the middle, and a bench all the way back. But 8 people in a tiny vehicle, I don't want to call it a clown truck, but it could be that.
It sounds like cramming 8 people into a small elevator. I think it's possible.
But we'll have to wait and see, right?
That's true.
I think it would work.
We got to wait.
Range and energy, and then finally price. I think price is the most sensitive subject, right? So range on our Maverick, and Mary has been driving it too. She did a video about this. She has kind of a slower speed mixed loop where she does some city and some highway. She got 46 mpg in our hybrid Maverick all-wheel drive, which puts its range of the Maverick to about 600 miles.
Yeah, as much as, which is a ton of range to have on a tank, and that's one of the perks of having a truck that's extremely efficient. If you're not getting one of the hybrid versions of the Maverick, your range will be a little bit less than that, but on the high end, 600 miles of range is great.
Or about 400 miles in the turbocharged version, which is still a pretty decent range. Plus, on a gasoline hybrid or a turbo version of the Maverick, refueling takes about, 4 to 5 minutes at a regular station.
Pretty easy.
Slate has a range of between 150 and 240 miles. That's going to be a little challenging for a lot of situations.
Yeah, it's enough to commute, and I think for most people, that amount, so that's a similar amount of range to what the little electric Fiat that I have gets, and I charge it about twice a week when I'm commuting, so that could work as a commuter car. As something that you would use to do road trips, definitely not.
Yeah, and then on Telo MT1, between 260 and 350 miles of range, where Telo has about 106 kilowatt hour battery, and the Slate comes between, with a 52 to 84 kilowatt hour battery. So, yeah, I mean, Telo has a little bit more range, but once again, recharge times could be an issue if you're traveling cross country.
Yeah.
But for around town, that could work really well.
But of course, we have to talk about price because, like you said, that's one of the most important things about any of these trucks. If you're in the market for a small truck, there's a good chance that part of the reason you're shopping for a small truck is for it to be more affordable in an ideal situation. And so price, we have to talk about.
Yeah, so when Slate event happened on Thursday, a few days ago, they said, they had a sign under $20,000. But there's a caveat. They were accounting for about $7,500 credit or federal tax incentive into that price. So without that credit or incentive, we're talking about $27,500.
Initially, when we were seeing images of the truck, they were saying that this would be around $25,000, and those were unconfirmed. Already, because of parts availability, this, that, and the other, whatever external factors, they've had to bump up that price to $27,500 instead of $25,000 like what they were originally planning for the Slate. And with some of those incentives, or even factoring without, a brand new truck that's starting under $30,000 in this day and age is still affordable.
Yeah, because look at the Maverick, right? The Maverick came out, 3.5 years ago. But now if you went out to buy one, which is a front-wheel drive, hybrid, Excel work truck, starts at $28,590. That's including destination charges. So the Slate comes under that.
Yeah, but that being said, the base Maverick is much better equipped than the base Slate truck. The base Slate truck has hand crank windows. It doesn't have any kind of center screen. It is very much bare bones.
And it's two-door.
Yeah, stereo systems are even an option.
Optional. Yeah, it doesn't have a stereo.
It doesn't have paint.
Well, why have paint?
Yeah.
Okay.
I get it. So it'll be interesting to see down the road how much all of the different accessories and options for the Slate pump the price up too, because the base version of it should be very affordable, but I wouldn't be surprised if you'll be able to add quite a bit of cost, $10,000 plus maybe, with some different options.
And of course, the Telo MT1, for the most basic version with single motor, smallest battery that they offer, the Telo MT1 comes in at about $41,520, and with all-wheel drive and the maximum battery, it's about $50K. So actually, the Telo is almost twice the price of a Slate, for example.
Yeah, so it's not so much factoring into the affordable side of the argument here. There's a lot of really interesting features and potential with the Telo and its design, but it's certainly quite a bit more expensive than the Maverick and the
Yeah,
Slate.
because for 41 grand or actually 49 grand, you could buy a host of other pickup trucks.
Yeah.
Anything from a Ranger to a Tacoma. You could buy almost any midsize truck for that money.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting comparison because definitely, especially with the Maverick and the Slate, as far as price goes, the Slate is a lot more basic. And if you do factor in those tax incentives and you're looking at a truck for more like $20,000 versus the Maverick for almost $30,000, then it could be worthwhile to take that lack of features and save the money. But it depends. It depends on how many of the features that you want for that truck and how much some of those accessories for the Slate are going to cost.
Yeah, so I'm still fairly cautious and skeptical on the success of the Slate or the Telo. I mean, the concepts look really fun and amazing and very intriguing, but there's a reason why Maverick is selling so well. Ford knows their customer base, really, really well. Ford has been around for over, 120 years?
Yeah,
Ish.
versus both of these startups that are so new
Yeah.
to some degree, like you said, we kind of have to withhold judgment. We don't know yet how the rollout on these different trucks are going to be, how practical they're going to be. We've got to wait till they come out, see how much the options cost, and actually get out and test them.
But you can now place your reservations for the Slate or the Telo right now as we speak. They're taking reservations. But you could also walk into your Ford dealer right now
And walk out
and pick
today.
one up, which actually begs a question. I know Hyundai Santa Cruz is there, but this begs a question. What is General Motors doing about this? What is Toyota or Nissan, or what are some of the other manufacturers doing about
Yeah,
this?
what about Ram? Where's the Rampage?
Hey, where's the Ram? So those are great questions, and hopefully we'll get some answers in the coming months.
Absolutely. So that's all for this video. There's a lot of exciting things coming down the pipeline, especially with the aggressive timelines that both Slate and Telo are looking at. It's going to be around the corner pretty shortly here that we'll actually be able to test these trucks.
Yeah, and let us know what you think. I mean, are you super, against electrification or having all electric trucks that you have to charge? And would you actually consider a Maverick? Let us know.